Hi everyone, this is James from Italian Polizio Teschi and Gialli Reviews, bringing you another Giallo review. Today I am going to be talking about a little bit of an atypical Giallo, so much so that I think the people that are really classify Giallo as only like black glove killer, you have kind of a body count film, would not call this a Giallo, and that is The Killer Must Kill Again. I personally use a little bit of a looser definition of Giallo, sort of like Troy Howarth, who featured quite a lot of Giallo in his volumes of So Deadly, So Perverse. And so this one is a later Giallo, directed in 1975 by none other than Luigi Cozzi, who is one of those names that, is not one of the big 3 or 4 directors, but if you start to dive into kind of Italian genre film, you're definitely going to run into his name. He is probably most famous now for kind of helping to run Dario Argento's kind of store/museum in Rome, Profondo Rosso, but he was a filmmaker in his own right, had a screenwriting credit on Floor Flies on Grey Velvet, associated with Argento throughout the years, did a Alien ripoff, which is pretty entertaining, called Star Crash, and a number of different films. And he's definitely one of those guys that was born a little bit too late. Not quite as late as Michele Soavi, but late enough that he's still in his 20s at this point, and he's not quite kind of at the height of his directorial powers to take advantage of kind of like the heights that the Italian cinema is at this time, and then of course it would fade quite quickly after this. So just thinking about when directors peak and whatnot, whereas Argento I feel like was almost the perfect age at this point, where he was about almost a decade older than Cozzi, and he could direct Deep Red and Suspiria and kind of just continue that run. So what is the synopsis of The Killer Must Kill Again? A man hires a killer to murder his wife, but things spiral out of control. Yeah, very simple. And so, in this round of recording episodes, because I do these episodes kind of in batches where I will watch a few films and then try to record a couple videos on it, I watched this, and I watched Murder Rock, and I watched Don't Torture a Duckling. And I'm struck by how much of a different Giallo this is. And the first time watching it, I was very enthralled, because this is not really kind of a mystery in the sense like we're trying to identify the killer. In fact, it kind of inverts that. And I think a lot of the strengths in this film lie with kind of not necessarily the dialogue that's written, but the scenario that it creates. And I think this is really one of those that, yes, you have to suspend some logic for sure, and try to not overthink kind of what characters can do, because there's definitely some decisions that could be considered highly questionable, but it's a very, very clever scenario, just in the way that different characters are introduced through sheer coincidence and accident, and in that sense it reminds me a lot of Hitchcock, very playful with kind of the way it constructs its plot. If we think about how like Hitchcock would construct most famously the plot of Psycho, but how this film kind of will show you different points of view. We get to spend a lot of time with our killer, who is identified very early. And then just stuff kind of goes wrong for him throughout the film, where he has to kind of act again and again and again. And it is kind of amusing and amusingly dark in a way. So I really appreciate how the scenario is created. It does get a little bit slow at times, but I think for the most part, it's for me at least, it certainly keeps me interested. And in many ways, this does have the opposite strengths of something like Murder Rock, which, in my opinion, has a fairly boilerplate kind of Giallo done, but invigorates it with a lot of like style and just kind of directorial flourishes, setting as well. This one's a little bland, and in fact, it does feel a little low budget. I feel like the highest budget thing about this is the fact that they're able to cast George Hilton, which is a great get for kind of their handsome devil character, who kind of does hire the guy to kill his wife. I also do wonder a little bit if this was originally like a Door into Darkness episode for Argento that didn't quite make it, because it does feel a little bit like one of those really clever scenarios that you can come up with, and it does feel maybe like just slightly elongated in the middle in a way that makes it a little longer. But yeah, I think Cozzi is not as strong of a visual storyteller, certainly, as someone like Fulci. And so while he does try to move the camera, and there are attempts at directorial flourishes, either Cozzi's ability or just the low budget, I think in general, kind of does hamper the film here. The film, nonetheless, was produced by Umberto Lizzi. I think it's impeccably cast. I think George Hilton as the guy that hires someone, the serial killer, to basically kill his wife, is great. The guy that actually plays the killer, whose name I'm blanking on right now, is fantastic. He kind of feels like the more real-life, actual serial killer version of Ivan Rasimov, who is a little too handsome, a little more movie handsome than this guy, but very gaunt and, very strong features. Just like a great kind of presence. And it's too bad he wasn't in more movies, because he is really, really strong here. I think he's definitely one of the strengths of the film. And because we are revealed who the killer is so early, we do actually get to spend a fair amount of time with him. But he's someone that really can make his presence felt without necessarily having a lot of dialogue. The film is interesting because it doesn't necessarily have lurid murders every 15 minutes. You're not going to get Argento-type murders, but it does get very, very sleazy at the end. There's kind of an uncomfortable sexual assault scene, definitely at the end too. But I think it is all done for a bit of a purpose, and I think it does, serve a point to the film. Alessio Arano, who is a very handsome guy, is really well cast here. He was originally in Damiano Damiani's The Most Beautiful Wife. Really great casting there. The Italians are just really good at casting like these handsome guys. I feel like American, we just see those people and like, okay, that guy's a leading man. But here they're just really good at playing up like kind of the sleazier aspects of it. So I really appreciate that. There's some great cost cutting. Again, this is kind of what I'm talking about as far as like Cozzi being, pretty ambitious in a lot of the different ideas in the scenario that he creates. Cross cutting between a couple sex scenes, one that is consensual and the other one that is actually rape. So yeah, I think this film is just as much Hitchcock as it is Argento. And everyone is just, kind of crappy in this film. Our heroes in this film are sort of low-level criminals too, as much as we can call them heroes. So it's definitely one that, if you're someone that's like, I must have a righteous character that I can root for. I don't know that Italian genre film in general is for you, but certainly not this film. You're spending time with a lot of, scummy people, and you're just kind of watching the scenario unfold in a way that, is pretty unexpected. I've seen a lot of these films. I think this one is pretty well done in terms of the way it actually does construct its plot. So who won the film? I'm going to give it to Luigi Cozzi. I think he did a great job here. This is actually my favorite of his films. Part of that is because I'm not really a sci-fi guy, so things like Star Crash, I enjoy it, but I'm always going to enjoy something like this a little bit more. And the rating, 8 out of 10. Really solid film. Definitely not one of like the first 15 or 20 Giallis you're going to watch out, but if you're kind of a freak and are probably watching this channel, you should definitely check out this one. I think you will benefit, especially if you try not to nitpick the plot too much. And that's just good advice in general for watching films, specifically Italian films. But this one in particular, I think, because I did listen to a couple podcasts, and like if your entire podcast for 35 minutes is just trying to pick apart the plot, it's like you kind of miss the point. This film, while not perfect in terms of construction, has a lot of things going for it that I think make it well worth watching. And if you can look past those, I think you're going to really enjoy this one. So thank you all for tuning in. Let me know what you think of this review. Let me know what you think of the film, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.